People are really wired up this way. And I think it's because we're so radically exploratory. So when you're proceeding towards a valued goal, let's call that a cue that goal attainment is about to occur. It's going to occur in some chain. A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D, and so on. You're like a hound on a trail. It's positive. It's like, yeah, this is working. Yeah, this is working. Yeah, this is working. That's positive. It's moving you ahead. And that's really where you experience a lot of your positive emotion. That's dopaminergically mediated. That's the system you'll kick with cocaine or any of the other drugs of abuse that people use that don't quell anxiety. It's a very, very desirable motivational state. I read a while back somebody who said, you can buy anything, but you can't buy wanting anything. And that's a staggeringly interesting comment, because you think, well, you know, is wanting a positive state? Well, you don't have it, so that's kind of annoying. And you think, well, no, I don't want to want things, I want to have them. It's like, yeah, don't be so sure about that. So one of the ways people have figured out how to deal with that is that they decide to want something that they can't get. And that's actually extraordinarily smart, and it's a deep archetypal idea. So here's an example. You've seen Pinocchio, right? Okay, so Pinocchio is about a puppet, a marionette. So that means someone else is pulling his strings, right? We don't know who. Sometimes it's virtually Satan himself. You remember the Stromboli? There's another character just after him, is the coachman. The coachman. He's like king of the thieves. And he ends up pulling Pinocchio's strings. So there's one scene in the Disney movie where the coachman reveals himself, and he's completely red, he has really big teeth, he's a satanic figure, and he scares the fox and the cat, who are like low-level criminals, who think they're bad, but, you know, have never really meant bad. He just scares them right into the corner. And so it's all of a sudden this person opens up and reveals the archetype behind, and then closes back down, pulling Pinocchio's strings. Okay, now, he's a marionette. Well, you know, the first question that arises is, who's pulling your strings? And that's a really good question. One of the things Jung said was, people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. And, you know, you can think about that for about 3 months, and it should make you afraid the whole time. Because as soon as you get that, you think, uh-oh, uh-oh. Like, let's say you're an ideologue of some sort, because some of you probably are. Socialist, fascist, environmentalist, something that has "ist" on the end. It's like, you think those are your ideas. They're not. You're their tools. And that's fine. If you want to be a tool of those ideas, you go right ahead. But you don't know where those ideas are leading. And they could well be leading somewhere you do not want to go. Now, the plus side is you don't have to take any responsibility for it, because, you know, you're just drifting in an ocean of thought. But one of the things that I learned from Jung was you should figure out just exactly which ideas are possessing you, and then you should decide if those are your ideas. And the probability that they are is 0. They're not your ideas. It's hard to have your own ideas. You have to derive them from your own experience. You know, and especially when you're not very old, you don't have that much experience. And so you can grab, you know, books full of ideas and claim them for your own, which is not acceptable. You can use those ideas to inform your ideas, but they're not your ideas. You're just a puppet. You know, and the Pinocchio movie is very interesting that way, because he's a puppet of forces that are really not on his side. Seriously not on his side. So, okay, anyways, back to the Pinocchio movie. Give me 1 sec. So, Geppetto doesn't have a son. Now, Geppetto's a good guy, right? He's a toy maker. He's got this little warm cabin. It's cozy. He's a good guy. He's friendly. He has a little cat. He pays attention to his little fish. He takes care of that. So we know Geppetto's a good guy. And he makes this puppet, and he thinks, man, I've got a puppet, but maybe I'd rather have something real. That's a good question for parents. You want a puppet, or do you want something real? And the answer is generally, often, I'll just have a puppet, as long as it does exactly what it... Maybe it'll be a medical school puppet, because that's certainly one good form of puppet. So, okay, so Geppetto decides, because he's a good guy, he thinks, no, I don't want this thing to have strings. I want it to be its own thing. I want it to be autonomous, individual, real. Okay, so what does he do? He wishes, right? What does he wish on? A star. Why do people wish on stars, of all the crazy things? Well, it's a divine thing, right? It's a divine thing. It's like, there's heaven, it's all It's the infinite. You go out at night and you see the stars, which you can't in the city, but you go out somewhere dark and you see the stars, and it's like it's you and the infinite. And it really is. It's a perfect representation of your relationship with the infinite, because the universe is about as infinite as you need. And it's going to give you a sense of awe, and that's partly why archaic people thought that God was in the sky. It's like, it's not, they weren't stupid, these people. They thought, God is what fills you with awe. So you look at the sky and you think, wow, you know, that's something. And it's an instinct. It's not a cognitive construction. So anyways, you aim at a star. It's this twinkling thing in the darkness, right? It's the light in the darkness. And it's above the worldly environment. It's something transcendent. And so that's what you bet a wish is on. It's like, I'm going to aim high. That's what he says. Aim high. And he thinks, well, it's not very likely, but I might as well aim high. That's a very good piece of advice. You want to aim so high you can't attain it. Because then you've got something worth, you might think, that's such a perverse piece of advice. It's why would you chase something you can't have? Well, the answer might be, because the chasing is worth it. And then you might think, well, what's worth it? Well, I can give you a hint about that too. It's like, develop your character. Because what you've got is what you carry with you wherever you go. And it's way better to be able to do things than to be rich. Because if you're rich, well, then that disappears. Poof, you're poor. But if you can do things, short of being demolished, and even then, people are unbelievable at overcoming those things. It's like, you're on the way. Here's an interesting experiment we did with undergraduate women. So, there's this idea in evolutionary psychology. It's called hypergamy. And hypergamy is the tendency of women to choose mates who are slightly older than them. It's about 4 years on average cross-culturally. And who are higher in the status hierarchy than they are. Okay, it's a very well documented tendency. And people who are cynical about that think women want wealth. And I thought, well, it's not a bad theory because it kind of evens the scales. It's like, you're going to have a family. You're basically, a chimpanzee baby clings to its mother's fur for 5,000 miles in the 3 or 4 years that it's doing the clinging. It's like, it's a major league impediment. You know, and if you're a new mother, your life is so much more complicated than it is when you're single that it's not even the same conceptual universe. It's a major league responsibility, and it slows you down. So then you might think, well, the logical thing to do would be to balance the scales a little bit, and that's perfectly reasonable. But I thought, no, I bet you women are smarter than that. I bet you can fool them, and the pickup artists do that all the time, because they mimic status.